You're about to hear a compilation of true horror stories from Reddit. For the best experience, use headphones. The moon cast a pale glow over the affluent suburban neighborhood of Dallas. The sporadic hum of a distant highway and occasional chirping of crickets punctuated the silence. Inside Sarah's house, the atmosphere was a stark contrast. Boisterous laughter filled the air as her friends gathered around the living room, sprawled across couches and bean bags. The aroma of buttery popcorn mingled with the faint scent of nail polish remover. Truth or dare? Mia asked, her eyes gleaming mischievously. The group had been playing for nearly an hour, the dares growing bolder and the truths more revealing. They'd all been friends since middle school. Secrets and history bound them together as tightly as blood. "Jake, you're next," Sarah said with a grin. The tension of her parents' recent divorce momentarily forgotten in this carefree revelry. Jake sighed, feigning reluctance. All right, dare. I dare you to wear Anne's makeup," Mia challenged, holding up a gaudy pink cosmetic bag. Anne giggled. "You better make me look fabulous," she teased. Just as the laughter reached another crescendo, Anne stood up. "I'm going to hit the bathroom. Be right back," she said, heading down the dim hallway. The group waited, the cheerful banter continuing with jokes and school gossip. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Sarah checked her phone, realizing Anne was taking unusually long. "I'll go check on her," Sarah offered, rising from her seat. She meandered down the hallway, calling out, "Anne, you okay in there?" No response. The door to the bathroom was slightly ajar. Frowning, Sarah pushed it open. Empty. An unsettled feeling crawled into her stomach. Anne's phone lay abandoned on the counter. It wasn't like her to go anywhere without it. "Guys, Anne's not in the bathroom," she said, returning to the living room. "Maybe she's playing a prank," Jake suggested, though his tone was uncertain. An hour elapsed, with mounting dread taking over their expressions. The friends scoured the house, but Anne was nowhere to be found. They were met only with the eerie silence of the night. "I found an open window in the basement," Mia announced, her voice trembling. "Why would Anne go down there?" Sarah muttered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. The mood shifted from jovial to panic as the minutes dragged on. The implications of an open window in the middle of the night were too unsettling to ignore. As they congregated in the living room again, Sarah's mother entered, drowsy and disoriented from sleep. "Why are you kids up so late? What's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Mom, Anne's missing. We think she might have left through the basement window," Sarah explained, her voice cracking with work. A lengthy call to the police ensued, but there was little else they could do in the deep of night. They were instructed to wait until morning. Wait. They couldn't just wait. The friends decided to take matters into their own hands. Armed with flashlights and an uneasy determination, they ventured out into the backyard, where the basement window offered a possible clue. The search led them to the backyard of Mr. Henderson, a seemingly benign, elderly neighbor known for his meticulous garden and friendly demeanor. A curious glint reflected off something metallic near his side door, a lock recently required. "This feels wrong," Sarah whispered, "but I have a gut feeling." Driven by desperate clamor, they picked the lock and slipped inside. The house was immaculate, almost unnervingly so, as if each object had its predetermined place. But then, the sound of muffled cries came from the basement. A chill ran down their spines. Jake led the way downstairs, gripping a kitchen knife he had swiped from Sarah's house. As they descended into the darkness, the cries grew louder, more distinct. The basement door creaked open to reveal a scene of utter horror. Anne lay bound and gagged on a metal table, her eyes wide with terror. Across the room, shelves were lined with various tools and devices far too sinister to contemplate. Photos of other missing children disappeared over the past few years. were pinned on a corkboard. "Oh my God," Mia gasped, tears streaming down her face. As the friends moved to free Anne, they heard footsteps descending the stairs. "It seems my little game was discovered," Mr. Henderson's voice echoed through the basement. The transformation in his demeanor was shocking. A benevolent neighbor turned malevolent captor. A struggle ensued, each moment escalating the terror. Henderson was surprisingly agile for his age, his strength fueled by some dark, twisted energy. Jake hurled himself at the man, the knife in his hands glinting ominously. Amid the chaos, Sarah managed to untie Anne, and together they fought their way to freedom. The police arrived too late for the initial struggle, but the friends' remarkable bravery ensured that the man was overpowered. Mr. Henderson was taken into custody, his house now a crime scene crawling with forensic teams. As the dawn broke, the friends sat huddled together on the curb, wrapped in blankets, their wounds tended to by paramedics. The neighborhood awoke to a different reality, a dark underbelly exposed by the bravery of a group of high school friends. The night began with jovial laughter and the clinking of glasses, the sounds bouncing off the time-worn walls of Leo's family home in Brooklyn. The house, with its creaky floorboards and musty odor of disuse, held a peculiar charm that added an authentic touch to their holiday sleepover. The friends had gathered there for a nostalgic reunion, eager to reminisce about their school days. Leo, always the charismatic leader, welcomed them with open arms, his warm smile belying a sinister secret hidden within the dark recesses of his home. Sam, the ever-loyal friend, was the first to arrive, greeted by Leah's usual bear hug. Jess and Olivia arrived shortly after, and the night quickly filled with the sounds of shared memories and inside jokes. Yet, amidst the laughter, Sam couldn't shake off a sense of unease that gnawed at the pit of his stomach. It was an odd feeling, one he chose to ignore, attributing it to his own overactive imagination. The evening progressed, and as the once normal night wore on, subtle oddities in Leo's behavior began to surface. His eyes would occasionally flicker with an unsettling intensity, and his laughter seemed forced, almost mechanical at times. Olivia, ever the skeptic, chalked it up to sheer exhaustion, while Jess, sensitive to the group's dynamics, felt an underlying tension she couldn't quite place. It was during a game of hide-and-seek, a playful throwback to their childhood, that the air of normalcy was thoroughly shattered. Sam, hiding in a dusty alcove, happened upon a loose floorboard. Curiosity got the better of him, and he pried it open to find an old leather-bound journal, its cover smeared with what appeared to be dried blood. "Guys, you've got to see this," Sam called out, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. As the group gathered around, Leo appeared in the doorway, his face pale and eyes wide with dread. "What did you find?" he asked, the calmness in his voice belied by the tension in his stance. The friends leafed through the journal, revealing pages upon pages of dark, twisted entries. Leo's neat handwriting detailed acts of unspeakable horror and violent obsessions, described with a detached, almost clinical precision. As they read on, a chilling realization gripped them. Leo had been documenting his desires to harm those closest to him. Olivia's logical mind faltered, unable to rationalize the nightmarish revelations. Jess's empathetic nature wrestled with the overwhelming sense of betrayal and fear, while Sam's skepticism gave way to an all-consuming terror. Leo, their cherished friend, stood revealed as a monster. Confronted with undeniable evidence of Leo's malevolence, the group descended into a frantic debate on what to do next. Could they confront him? Should they call the police? The very foundations of their friendship crumbled beneath the weight of this newfound horror. The basement, a space they had avoided all night, now beckoned with the promise of further secrets. Against their better judgment, they descended the narrow, creaking staircase, each step echoing their growing dread. As they reached the bottom, the flickering light did little to dispel the shadows that clung to the walls. casting eerie shapes that seemed almost alive. It was in this dim, oppressive space that the true extent of Leo's darkness was revealed. Old, rusted tools lay scattered about, stained with what could only be dried blood. The walls were adorned with macabre sketches and cryptic notes, all leading to one horrifying conclusion. Leo had planned to turn violent fantasies into reality. Leo's calm demeanor disintegrated into a frantic desperation as he faced his friends. "I never meant for you to find out like this," he stammered, retreating further into the shadows. "I never wanted to hurt you." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The friends, armed with the journal's damning evidence, forced a dramatic confrontation. Their voices echoed around the basement, a cacophony of fear, anger, and disbelief that culminated in a violent struggle. Through the chaos, it was Sam who managed to subdue Leo, pinning him to the cold, damp floor until the police arrived. As Leo was led away in handcuffs, his once warm eyes now dull and devoid of humanity, the friends were left to grapple with the emotional fallout. The sight of the police taking their friend away did little to alleviate their trauma. Their lives, once intertwined in a seemingly unbreakable bond of trust, were now irreparably shattered. In the aftermath, the journal's final entries haunted them. Vague mentions of other names, other potential victims, hinted at atrocities yet to be uncovered. The horror they had unearthed in Leo's basement was but a fragment of a larger, more sinister tapestry. Chris' laughter echoed through the cold night air, bouncing off the decrepit walls of the old mansion. His bravado felt out of place in the foreboding atmosphere of the place they had come to know as the murder house. The thrill-seeker's eyes gleamed with a mix of excitement and defiance, determined to prove his courage and shake off any notion of weakness. Laura stood beside him, her arms folded, eyes scrutinizing the mansion's decaying facade. Ever the skeptic, she had joined the venture to debunk the haunting myth surrounding the house. Though she clung to rational explanations, a thin layer of doubt, born of an unspoken fear of the unknown, lingered beneath her sharp demeanor. Tom lingered near the gate, his face pale and eyes darting nervously. Peer pressure and a desperate desire to fit in had dragged the reluctant participant along, yet each creak and shadow amplified his constant fear. He winced at every sound, bracing for the now inevitable horrors he had been trying to avoid. I, Megan, quietly walked a step behind the group. I hadn't planned for this night, torn between the urge to be a part of something exhilarating and a foreboding that whispered warnings into my psyche. Somewhere deep inside, I knew something was terribly wrong, yet I followed, striving to belong. The mansion's exterior was a haunting sight. Encased in an overgrowth of vines and flora gone wild, it exuded an aura of abandonment. A shroud of mist clung to the ground, inhibiting visibility and lending an ethereal quality to the scene. Past the rotting wooden door frame, the creaking floorboards beneath our weight heralded our entry into the malignant lair. Peeling wallpaper revealed scars of aged neglect, the pale remnants of former luxury. Furniture lay broken, sprawled in disarray across the dusty, forlorn expanse of rooms. Every breath we took stirred the dust, sending it dancing in beams of moonlight that seeped through cracked window panes. Despite Chris' overt confidence, I noticed his fingers trembling as he clutched his flashlight. He led the group with that same wavering light, casting eerie shadows on walls that seemed to close in on us. "Look," he whispered, pointing downwards to a set of fresh footprints encrusted in the dust, leading deeper into the abyss. My heart thudded in my chest, echoing the creaks of the wooden planks beneath us. Silent terror ebbed and flowed, stomach-churning dread tight in my guts. We forged ahead, drawn further into the house's dark clutches. Laura's flashlight, sweeping in practiced arcs, caught the glow of something out of place, lit candles. She moved towards them, each flicker casting monstrous silhouettes against the wall. It dawned on us simultaneously. We were not alone. Hastened whispers of alarm tore through our group, but it was too late to back out now. Through twisting corridors, we arrived at a room cloaked in shadow and malevolence. The ritualistic symbols adorning the walls exuded an almost tangible malice, an ancient language of dread. The whispers, faint but unmistakable, seemed to emanate from the very walls, a multi-layered murmur of nightmare-inducing promises. As the fear crawled up my spine, a hideous realization settled in. These signs of life weren't residuals of a haunted past, but threads woven into a malicious present. Chris's face, typically so confident, now took on a mask of unease. The myth wasn't merely a tale. Located beneath a broken stairwell, we found a hidden room, its entrance embedded in darkness. Laura hesitated, but Chris edged closer, refusing to surrender to his mounting fear. "We'll face it together," he declared, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying his doubt. The room revealed its grotesque secrets. A dismantled altar, objects of twisted faith. Here the myth came to life, but not in the spectral underpinning we had feared. Instead, we faced something more vile, a cult that lived to perpetuate the horrors of the legend. The leader, a figure of venomous charisma, brought chilling truth to our terrifying discoveries. Tom's whimper broke the silence, his fears bubbling over in a cascade of dread. "We need to get out," he stuttered, but escape was no longer a simple option. The air grew heavier, malicious whisperings growing in intensity, leading us to the realization we had walked into a trap. As the tension reached breaking point, grotesque figures materialized from the shadows. Cult members once like us, now transfigured by the horrors they sought. They closed in, their intentions unmistakable. Their leader approached with a measured, menacing grace, eyes locked onto Chris. "Welcome," he purred, "to the final chapter of your courage." Unexpectedly, they pounced, capturing each of us in turn. Struggling against our bindings, we were dragged with macabre ceremony to the very heart of the ritual. Their leader had deemed Chris the final victim, the linchpin of their reenactment. Lost in terror, my mind scrambled for a way out. The walls, which had seemed so oppressive and close, now stood as obstacles in a grim escape. Tom, drenched in panic, whimpered prayers to a god he had long abandoned. And then it happened. In the grips of chaos, I found strength deep within. Survival instinct trumped the terror. A surge of adrenaline powered my every move. Breaking free from my restraints, I barreled through the darkness, the echo of pursued footsteps hammering my resolve. I traversed dismal corridors amidst ghastly apparitions of our own making. Each step took me closer to the edge of freedom. Behind me, Chris' anguished screams of defiant struggle distilled into chilling silence. I dared not look back. Bursting through the front door, I collapsed on the cold ground. The police followed the aftermath, raiding the house, yet finding naught but empty shadows. The cult had vanished, evanescent like a fleeting nightmare, leaving the legend intact for the next thrill seekers. Days later, my reflection mirrored not relief, but trauma. The urban legend continued, still calling out to new prey. In the small suburban town of Crescent Falls, Oregon, life was usually tranquil. The breezy evenings carried the comforting routine of neighbors mowing lawns, kids playing hide and seek, and dogs barking merrily. That night, however, all semblance of peace was shattered. During a sleepover at our house, my sister Lily, our friends Sarah and Jake, and I were engrossed in a horror movie marathon. The TV flickered with each flash of ghastly scenes, casting eerie shadows across our living room walls. Our neighborhood was tucked away from the hustle and bustle of the city, usually devoid of any disturbances. But as the clock struck midnight, the air grew unnervingly still. It was Lily who first noticed him. The innocent, imaginative 9-year-old, who often crafted fantastical tales of knights and dragons in her head, was jolted into a new horrid reality. She brushed her dark curls away from her face and stammered, pointing to the window. "Tom, There's someone outside. Her 16-year-old brother, cast a sidelong glance, but shrugged nonchalantly. It's probably some kid from school trying to spook us out. Jake, the daring one in our club, leaned closer, trying to discern any movement. Sarah, always shy, clung to the shadows of the room, her wide eyes darting nervously. At first, we thought it was just another Halloween prank. Small towns like ours had their way of making idle nights memorable with harmless scares. That's when it happened for real. The man stepped closer, pressing his face against the glass. His eyes were hollow, and his stare was unblinking, cold. He wasn't from around here, that much was clear. For days after, his appearances were sporadic at first. His shadow glimpsed briefly at a distance, his figure spotted under the flickering lamplight down the street. But his persistence grew, and with it, the tension among us mounted. Lily began waking up drenched in sweat, convinced she heard whispers by her window. We tried to involve the adults, of course. Our parents dismissed our stories as childish paranoia, while the local police's cursory investigation turned up nothing. There was no trace of him, no footprints, no fingerprints. A ghost in the corporeal world. One night, he left a message scrawled on our driveway with a piece of chalk. "I'm watching you," it read in jagged, hurried strokes. And he seemed to know everything. Sarah's tendency to bite her fingernails when anxious, Jake's habit of looking over his shoulder before going outside. Worst of all, he seemed to revel in our growing dread. Lily's determined imagination became our ace. We started formulating plans to catch him, to prove our sanity to the doubtful adults. My skepticism faded as I watched my little sister's bravery surpass mine. Our neighborhood, once a canvas of mundane tranquility, was now a crypt of fear. Every rustling leaf became a potential harbinger of doom, every creak of the floorboards a lurking threat. The once soothing hum of the streetlights now buzzed with sinister intent. The serene backdrop of our town intensified the horror that encroached upon our lives. With each sighting, our paranoia grew. Days bled into nights of restless sleep, and our home became a fortress of makeshift alarms and vigilant watches. The man was always one step ahead, taunting us with his omnipresence. Our interactions revealed our unraveling sanity. Lily's once gleeful laughter turned into anxious murmurs. I tried to remain the steadfast protector, but a gnawing fear gripped my heart. Sarah withdrew, her timidity morphing into silent terror, while Jake, ever the adventurer, became reckless, desperate to confront our tormentor. The psychological tension reached its zenith when Lily found a note slipped under her pillow. Soon, it warned, he had breached our sanctuary, and we knew the final confrontation loomed. On the night of the break-in, the moon hung low, casting a pale glow that only deepened the shadows. We had prepared, as best as frightened kids could. The plan was simple but risky. Corner him in the enclosed living room, where we had set up traps to ensnare him. He entered quietly, but the weight of his presence was a suffocating shroud. The thud of his heavy footsteps reverberated through the walls. As he approached, the air buzzed with electricity, fear palpable in every corner of the room. With a swift motion, he lunged, but our traps triggered, a cacophony of alarms blaring. The living room lights blazed on, and we saw him up close for the first time. His face was gaunt, his eyes devoid of humanity. There was a glimpse of malevolent satisfaction as he realized he was caught. We screamed, and as Lily and Sarah huddled together, Jake and I fought off our tears and fear. The police arrived moments later, drawn by our frantic calls, and the man was finally taken away. The horror was ending, but at a great cost to our innocence and peace of mind. The resolution brought little solace. The man's arrest revealed a chilling reality. He had notes and sketches of numerous families in our neighborhood. His fixation on children chilled our community to its core. The aftermath left our small town marred with trauma. The semblance of safety we once took for granted was shattered. Therapy sessions, security upgrades, and sleepless nights became our new normal. Trust was a distant memory, and every shadow held vestiges of our darkest fears. The warm, comforting glow of Sarah's living room created a cocoon of safety as we sprawled out on her oversized couch, waiting for our pizza to arrive. Outside, the suburban streets of Denver were quiet, lined with perfectly manicured lawns and homes that stood like sentinels of tranquility. Kevin lay contentedly at our feet, his ears occasionally perking up at the sounds of distant footsteps or rustling leaves. But as the clock inched towards midnight, Kevin's behavior grew increasingly restless. His ears stood erect, and his gaze fixated on the older house next door. Thompson's property. Mr. Thompson doesn't really talk to anyone, does he? Laura mumbled, her eyes following Kevin's line of sight. Sarah shrugged. He's just a bit private, I guess. Kevin's sudden bark broke the serenity, echoing harshly in the still night. Unexpectedly, he bolted, disappearing under the aged fence separating the two properties. Panic surged through me. Sarah, we need to get him, I urged. We grabbed flashlights and crept into the musty yard. The air seemed thicker, heavier, a stark contrast to the crisp, clean scent of Sarah's backyard. Our footsteps echoed as we approached Mr. Thompson's house. The grass was overgrown, riddled with weeds, a perfect mirror of neglect. A flickering light from the basement window caught my eye. Cautious but determined, we entered through an unlocked side door, stepping into a labyrinth of dust and shadows. The interior of Mr. Thompson's house was a stark contrast to its exterior, Spartan yet strangely immaculate. Old wooden floorboards creaked underfoot. The faint, musty odor of aged wood filled the air, mixing unsettlingly with the smell of forgotten things. Kevin! Kevin! We called out in hushed tones, but the dog was nowhere to be seen. As we navigated deeper into the house, a low, menacing growl emerged from beyond a closed door. Sarah's fingers trembled as she reached for the handle, pushing it open to reveal a flight of stairs descending into the basement. The flickering light grew more pronounced, shadows dancing ominously on the damp walls. The basement was a repository of horrors. Misshapen mannequins with missing limbs loomed in dim corners, and the walls were plastered with faded, grainy pictures of people. Men, women, children, all missing. Laura's breath hitched in her throat. This can't be real, she whispered, clutching my arm tightly. Amidst the chaos, Kevin stood growling at a concealed door. We pried it open to reveal a hidden room furnished with rusted metal shelves and sinister tools. The air was colder, almost suffocating. Bound notebooks, packed with cryptic scribbles and forgotten clippings, detailed the fates of the missing. Each page we turned revealed darker truths, confirming our worst fears. But before we could fully grasp the magnitude of our discovery, the sound of creaking floorboards above us signaled the return of Mr. Thompson. We need to hide, Sarah hissed, dragging us behind a stack of old crates. Mr. Thompson's footsteps were calm, calculated, belying the terror that churned within us. He descended the stairs slowly, each step a reminder of our impending doom. The low hum of his breath punctuated the silence as he scanned the room, his eyes finally settling on the ajar door. With a chilling calmness, he approached. Kevin's protective impulse kicked in. He charged, growling fiercely. Mr. Thompson stumbled back, momentarily thrown unbalanced. Run, I yelled, and we dashed for the stairs with Kevin at our heels. The basement light flickered violently, casting monstrous shadows on the walls. Emerging into the night, we hardly dared to breathe as we sprinted back to Sarah's house. Heartbeats thundered in our ears. The police arrived just in time, their sirens piercing the night. But fear lingered as we watched Mr. Thompson slip away into the dark, disregarded corners of the neighborhood. By morning, the nightmare had morphed into a chilling reality. The police, despite their best efforts, found no trace of Mr. Thompson. The community was left grappling with the horrifying realization that beneath the veneer of their perfect neighborhood lurked unfathomable evil.